Thank you so much for joining us on Africa This Morning. It is the 4th day of April 2014. Let's start the bulletin with a look at the leading stories.
Guinea Ebola update. Foreign mining firms lock down operations as the death toll reaches 83. South Sudan crisis. Millions of people facing a food shortage as the rainy season approaches. Kenya Cabinet briefing. Government of Kenya undertakes to allocate 34 billion shillings to establish 2 hospitals in every county. NATO on Russia. NATO cautions that further Russian intervention would be a historic mistake.
Foreign mining firms have locked down operations in Guinea and pulled out some international staff in the latest attempt to manage the impact of the Ebola virus that is, based on recent reports, estimated to have claimed 83 lives.
According to the United Nations World Health Organization, 5 new suspected infections were reported in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to 127. Medical charity Medicines Sans Frontiers has warned of an unprecedented epidemic that is testing weak health systems across West Africa. Suspected cases of one of the world's most lethal infectious diseases have also been reported in neighboring Liberia and Sierra Leone. The epicenter of Guinea's 2-month-old outbreak has been in the southeast, close to its main iron ore reserves. The country is also the world's top exporter of bauxite, the raw material used in aluminium production. Farms were more concerned by what was happening in the densely populated capital Conakry than in remote mining sites in the interior, where controls were easier to put in place. The medical aid charity Medicines Sans Frontiers warned this week that poverty-hit Guinea is facing an Ebola epidemic of a magnitude never before seen, as the nation's president appealed for calm amid a rising death toll. WHO has reported 12 suspected cases and 4 deaths in the oceanfront city of 2 million people. Neighboring Senegal has closed its land borders with Guinea, and countries across the region have taken precautionary measures, including banning the sale and consumption of bats, a regional delicacy but an animal believed to be a vector of the virus.
From West Africa to South Sudan, millions of people in war-racked South Sudan are facing a food shortage as the rainy season approaches. United Nations officials in Sudan say there is inadequate funding for humanitarian aid efforts.
The World Food Programme and its partners plan to assist the 25,000 conflict-affected people in Yao with food rations to last 15 days. 5 million people are in need of assistance, and UN agencies are having trouble pre-positioning food stocks before the onset of the rainy season. The downpours will make already challenging roads even more difficult to navigate and force agencies to airdrop food aid, which costs significantly more money.
Traditionally, we wouldn't be here because we would have pre-positioned food, which would have given us the ability to have a distribution that was much more systematic to support the needs of the most vulnerable in this community.
More than 700,000 people have been forced to flee their homes since mid-December, when violence erupted between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and fighters loosely allied to former Vice President Riek Machar. Another 250,000 people have sought refuge in Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya and neighboring Sudan.
We have already 250,000 refugees that were in exile for 20 years, came back, and are again in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia and in Sudan. If peace does not come soon, we risk that they lose hope.
The United Nations has appealed to donors for $995 million to fund aid operations in Sudan this year. So far, it has obtained only $54 million. And the appeal for $1.3 billion for South Sudan has only been funded at 24%. The United States on Tuesday promised an additional $83 million in humanitarian aid to South Sudan, bringing its total to $411 million. The warring parties resumed a second round of talks on Tuesday in Addis Ababa, which is urging the sides to revive a moribund ceasefire signed on January the 23rd.
Come Monday next week, the international community will commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. The dead may have been buried, but the mental trauma left behind by the genocide is still very much alive among the survivors.
In a church at Nyamata, south of the Rwandan capital Kigali, the possessions of the dead have been left where they were dropped. Some 5,000 Tutsis sought sanctuary in the church. Few survived. Jean Bosco Ringira hid under the benches, protected by the bodies of his neighbors and family, before escaping to the hills at night.
Sometimes I still feel human, but other times I feel crazy. When you've seen so many dead bodies, I saw about 200. I saw my wife and my father, my son and my daughter. You lose your mind and you become crazy.
Rwanda suffered one of the 20th century's most brutal genocides. 800,000 people were murdered in 3 months, many killed systematically with machetes. Before 1994, there was no word for trauma here. Mental illness was usually addressed by traditional healers. But after the massacres, counseling was needed as a matter of urgency. A national policy for mental health was established the following year. There were no psychiatrists in the country in 1994, but now there's a mental health doctor in each of the 40 or so district hospitals. Just 13 when the violence broke out, Vestine survived rape and 9 months later gave birth. 2 decades on, she still struggles to accept her daughter, but says that group therapy has helped them find peace.
They help counsel us and teach us that we can move beyond our past. I've begun to feel like I can put this behind me and change, but you move forward step by step.
Rebuilding resilience after experiencing trauma is a lengthy process. A recent study shows that even 2 decades after the genocide, a quarter of survivors exhibit symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
It was a night at that time, a kind of darkness, a deep one. But now, I think darkness didn't went totally, but we have light, and you can open the door and the window to be able to look to the future.
Rwanda has brought itself back from the brink of chaos along a path of healing. But 20 years on, invisible scars still run deep.
From Rwanda to the north of the continent, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in Algiers, Algeria, to kickstart the North African tour, which is expected to be dominated by talks on the insecurity threats posed by Al-Qaeda.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was welcomed by Algeria's Foreign Minister Ramtane Lamamra. Kerry is expected to hold talks on jihadist violence that has plagued the vast Sahel-Sahara region since the 2011 overthrow of Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, prompting a French-led military intervention in Algeria's southern neighbor Mali in January last year. The United States is consolidating efforts to restore stability and promote development in Algeria and the neighboring countries vulnerable to unrest. Algeria is recognized by its American partners as a key country in the region. The timing of Kerry's visit is, however, being questioned. It comes at a time when campaigning is in full swing for an April 17th presidential election in which ailing incumbent Abdelaziz Bouteflika is seeking a 4th term. But the Algerian government has rejected the criticism, saying Kerry's visit had nothing to do with the election, but was part of a wider tour that would also take him on to Morocco.
The government of Kenya has allocated 34 billion shillings to establish 2 hospitals in each of the 47 counties in the country. In the last briefing by the cabinet, the Ministry of Health assured that the quality of healthcare services will not be compromised even after the services are devolved. Sam Gakunyi reports.
On the last day of cabinet briefings, the devolution of health services to the counties and the free maternity health care were among the successes the Ministry of Health highlighted. The free maternity program rolled out last year saw a 20% increase of deliveries in public hospitals, consequently reducing mortality rates.
This service has been rolled out successfully in all our 301 hospitals and 2,087 health centers and dispensaries. So far, we've spent Kenya shillings 2.2 billion towards this service.
Although the quality of healthcare may be compromised, the ministry was quick to note that the number of visits to health facilities have increased from 12 million Kenyans to 18 million Kenyans.
Therefore, it means more people are accessible to the health services.
The health services are now fully devolved to the counties, the challenges notwithstanding. Among the challenges experienced include the exodus of doctors employed by the government, leading to an acute shortage of personnel. The ministry, however, promises to train more doctors.
I want to assure all Kenyans that we are aware of that shortfall in training, and we are putting more money in that area so that we ensure we train as many doctors as possible.
On their part, the Ministry of Labour is also taking measures to improve labour productivity as we rank lowest in the region. On the other hand, the Ministry of Education will review the education curriculum in Kenya and increase the number of public technical institutions from the current 44 to 135.
Of establishing 135 technical training institutes so that young graduates who are coming out of Form 4 can have access to quality and competency-based technical training skills and competencies, which is needed for economic growth of this country.
Still in Kenya, following the introduction of free primary education in the country in 2003, millions of girls enrolled in various schools countrywide for the first time. Hundreds of thousands of others, especially in remote regions, are still out of school. So what could be preventing the girls from acquiring their education? Ebru Africa's news reporter Agnes Kekunga with that story from the Kenyan slum village of Korogosho.
They say if you educate a girl child, you are educating the whole society. And if you empower a girl child, you are empowering her whole community. But this does not come easily. Traditionally, the girl child in the African setting is always disadvantaged in many ways compared to the boy child. And this is the case in education. This is why various non-government organizations in many developing countries have prioritized girls' education as part of their strategic vision for women and girls.
If you want to empower the society, and if you want to eradicate some of the biggest problems that we have in this country, including poverty, disease, ignorance, then you have to educate the girl child and also empower them. That is,
Kenya is not different. Department for International Development, a UK-based organization, will invest over 8 billion Kenya shillings in a project dubbed Wasichana Wote Wasome, meaning let all girls read. The initiative will support at least 300,000 girls from arid and semi-arid lands and informal settlements to get quality education.
If you go through education, you girls, you're going to be 3 times more likely to get a job. You're going to be more productive at home if you go through your education. You're going to get more money in salary as well from your education.
Turkana, Samburu, Marsabit, Kwale, Kilifi and Tana River counties will benefit from the project since they are the most affected. It is in these regions where communities will be mobilized to provide direct support to girls at home through financial supports, mentoring and providing care to enable teenage mothers attend school.
Our work at the baseline level was to set the baseline value against which we are going to monitor whether these interventions are actually changing the lives of the marginalized girls.
The girl child education in Kenya has not been successful for many years, with many areas recording low school enrollment. and even many girls dropping out of school due to early pregnancies. The project will run in 500 schools countrywide. Now, this particular program, which advocates for girl-child education, aims to improve school enrollment, retention and attendance for over 80,000 marginalized girls in Kenya. Agnes Gakunga, Ebru Africa News, Korogocho Slum, Nairobi.
Moving from Africa to the Balkans, NATO is cautioning that further Russian intervention in Ukraine would be a historic mistake. These warnings come as a top NATO commander claimed that Russian forces could seize some parts of Ukraine in 3 to 5 days.
NATO issues another warning to Russia as Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen warns Russia about moving further into Ukraine.
If Russia were to intervene further in Ukraine, I wouldn't hesitate to call it an historic mistake. That would lead to further isolation, international isolation of Russia. It would have far-reaching consequences.
NATO suspended cooperation with Russia, a move a spokesman from Russia's foreign ministry says was a throwback to the Cold War.
The decision by the NATO Council of Foreign Ministers to suspend practical military and civil cooperation with Russia creates a sense of déjà vu. The language of the statements rather resembles the verbal jousting of the Cold War era.
Earlier, NATO's top military commander said Russia had massed all the forces it needs on Ukraine's border if it were to decide to move further into Ukraine. He said Moscow could achieve its objective in 3 to 5 days.
And to South America, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake has hit northern Chile a day after an 8.2 magnitude tremor killed 6 people, destroyed at least 2,000 houses, and led to mass evacuations. The quake is the strongest of several aftershocks following Tuesday's tremor. An earthquake 7.6 magnitude strong struck off northern Chile late Wednesday following a powerful and deadly 8.2 magnitude quake that hit a day earlier. Yesterday's quake was located 12 miles south of the port of Iquique. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said there was no widespread tsunami threat, but that the latest tremor could generate a local tsunami. Chile's emergency office said it ordered a preventative evacuation of the coastal area.
Due to the situation, we established a preventative evacuation of the regions of Arica and Parinacota. The Hydraulic and Oceanographic Service of the Chilean Navy established a tsunami alert for the coast of Chile. The entire coastal border must be evacuated.
The quake is the strongest of several aftershocks following Tuesday's tremor. The aftershock caused buildings to wobble and people to run into the streets in the port of Iquique, which is one of the cities hit by Tuesday's night's quake. There have been no reports of damage from the latest quake. Waves of the 2.1 meter magnitude have hit some areas, and there have been power cuts, fires and landslides. The government said that the declaration of a disaster in the regions of Tarapacá, Arica and Parinacota was aimed at avoiding instances of looting and disorder. President Michelle Bachelet said the country had faced the emergency well and called on those in affected regions to keep calm and follow instructions from the authorities. 1 person died and 14 others were injured on Wednesday in a shootout at a U.S. Army base in Fort Hood, Texas. Reports, however, cannot confirm whether the shooter was killed or not.
The shooting, the third such incident at the U.S.-based military base, has led to the lockdown of Fort Hood. Police were securing its perimeter and helicopters could be seen circling the base in live TV footage broadcast from the scene. Military officials, however, could not confirm reports that the shooter had been killed, despite early reports by its Directorate of Emergency Services that the culprit was dead. Central Texas College, which has a Fort Hood campus, ordered an immediate evacuation of all students and staff and cancelled classes. In 2009, a former Army psychiatrist shot dead 13 people and wounded 32 others in a shooting spree at Fort Hood. In September, a gunman opened fire at the Washington Navy Yard, killing 12 and wounding 4 before being slain by police. Last month, a civilian shot dead a sailor aboard a ship at a U.S. Navy base in Norfolk, Virginia.
And with that, we come to the end of the Bulletin on Africa this morning. Join us next as we take a look at the leading conversations on our social media segment on Trend.